When the mind-shattering screams of Henry Wilson ripped through the hellish barracks, his fellow recruits already knew they would never see him again. The forsaken souls handpicked for the Death's Apprentice program quickly learned that failure meant a fate worse than death. Forcibly conscripted into the most feared and ruthless military unit in the galaxy, Henry and the other doomed recruits underwent a nightmarish transformation. Their bodies were pushed beyond the limits of pain and endurance. Their minds were shattered and rebuilt into weapons of focused aggression. Their very DNA was altered, twisted by heretical xenotech into something both more and less than human. All to face a single, unrelenting truth. Humanity was losing the war. The Barzan Empire had the numbers, the weapons, the technology, and now they had cracked humanity's most critical advantage by reverse engineering the finest human war machines. Intel painted a grim picture, a massive armada poised to burn the cradle of Earth in a hurricane of plasma and antimatter. Only the Death's Apprentices could hope to stop them. Only these tormented living weapons could scalpel through enemy lines to cut out the tumor before the killing blow fell. Their recruitment had been meticulous, every candidate possessing an impossible cocktail of genetic markers, unlocked potential, and psychological suitability. After all, melding the human genome with Barzan biotech and heretical psi-crafting was not without risk. As training concluded in a haze of nausea-inducing stimulants and barely remembered horrors, the apprentices had been reduced to a mere 5% of their original number, the rest dead, comatose, or hopelessly insane. Only their entanglement with eldritch, undying entities sustained them through the invasive procedures. Henry himself nearly lost his mind when he first brushed the twisting, writhing thoughts of the anti-life bound to his cortex. He could feel his humanity eroding with every enhanced reflex, every psi-fueled strike, every whispered secret of death and undeath. When his fire team was betrayed and butchered on its first mission, gunned down in the skeletal ruins of a Barzan shipyard, the Phasic entities dragged his shredded body back from oblivion, reknitting bone and flesh with each shuddering breath. After his miraculous return, Henry was summoned to Mortis, the unseen master of the Death's Apprentices. Mortis spoke of Henry's unprecedented scores in psychic warfare, hyper-adaptive combat, and resurrection protocols. His words were blades of freezing obsidian, slicing away the last anchors of Henry's identity. The oldest secret was laid bare. The apprentices could not truly die. But with every plunge into the abyss opened its hungering maw a little wider. To pay back the miracle of unlife, their very souls were forfeit. They would become nightmares, eternally hunting down the enemies of their species. Standing on the precipice between life and death, humanity and horror, duty and damnation, Henry made his choice. To defeat the Barzans, he would become fear itself, an immortal revenant, an undying apprentice of death. The war was only beginning. Henry's undying essence dragged him back from the brink time and time again as he carried out mission after mission deep in Barzan space. Each time he relied on his eldritch abilities, he could feel himself slipping further from his humanity. On the research compound mission, Henry phased through a reinforced bulkhead and caught 2 Barzan guards by surprise. His monomolecular blade flashed, eviscerating them before they could even scream. As he fought his way to the lab, a hail of plasma fire tore through his chest, burning away heart and lungs. Henry collapsed, his regeneration too slow to keep up with the catastrophic damage. But death was only a temporary setback now. Henry's undying form knitted back together, and he rose again, an unstoppable revenant. He unleashed a psychic scream, and the Barzan soldiers clutched their heads in agony, blood pouring from their eyes. Henry moved among them like a wraith, slicing and blasting, until none were left alive. He found the scientist cowering beneath a desk. The man begged for his life, but Henry had no mercy left to give. A single slash, and it was over. Henry destroyed the computers and data drives, erasing the bioweapon research. But victory tasted like ashes. Back at base, the reports were dire. The Barzans were burning world after world, drawing ever closer to Earth. In the command center, Mortis turned to Henry, his death's head gaze inscrutable. It was time to end this. Henry pushed himself harder than he ever had before, spending long hours in the psi simulators and the pain racks. He could feel the barriers between dimensions growing thin and the powers of the void answering his call. He could walk through walls, hurl tanks with a thought, even tear the life essence from his foes to heal his own wounds. But every time he died and came back, a little more of Henry Wilson was left behind. The assault on the Barzan homeworld was a blur of fire and blood. Henry and the surviving apprentices carved a path of destruction through the enemy forces, an unstoppable army of the undead. In the command bunker, they found General Nesso directing the battle from an impenetrable energy shield. Henry stepped forward to face him alone. He pitted his psionic abilities against Nesso's advanced tech, and the bunker shook with the force of their duel. Consoles exploded and supports buckled. Henry was blasted, burned, and broken again and again, but he kept coming, an unkillable nightmare. In the end, Henry held Nesso's shattered corpse in his hands. But the cost had been too high. The other apprentices lay broken and lifeless, beyond even their undying powers to regenerate, and Henry could barely remember what it felt like to be human. The voices of the void whispered in his mind, drowning out the last echoes of his mortal thoughts. As the human reinforcement secured the bunker, Henry stumbled outside, reeling from the magnitude of what he had become. The war was over, but Henry's struggle was just beginning. How could he ever go back to a normal life when he was so far from human? What did the future hold for him now, and for the humanity he had sacrificed everything to save? Henry stood amidst the smoldering ruins of the Barzan command bunker, his palms sweating. The war was over, but at what cost? His body, repeatedly torn apart and remade, felt alien to him now. The whispers of the void grew louder, drowning out his own thoughts. In the days that followed, an uneasy peace settled over the galaxy. Both humanity and the Barzans licked their wounds, but the fighting never truly ceased. Guerrilla attacks from Barzan holdouts kept the newly won human territories on edge. Unable to face the cheering crowds or the concerned looks from his superiors, Henry retreated to a remote training facility. Under Mortis's watchful gaze, he pushed his abilities to new limits. "Again!" Mortis commanded, his voice cutting through the darkness of the training chamber. Henry focused, reaching out with his mind. Reality bent around him as he tore open a hole in space-time. Tentacles of pure darkness writhed through the portal, grasping at nothing. With a thought, Henry closed the rift, banishing the otherworldly horrors back to the void. "Your control improves," Mortis said, "but at what cost to your humanity?" Henry didn't answer. He couldn't. The words to describe his inner turmoil escaped him, lost in the cacophony of alien whispers that filled his head. Instead, he turned his attention to the fundamental forces of the universe itself. Gravity, electromagnetism, the strong and weak nuclear forces, all bent to his will. As his power grew, so too did the strain on his fractured psyche. Visions of fallen comrades haunted his waking hours. The faces of those he'd killed, human and Barzan alike, swam before his eyes. He clung to his memories of Earth, of what it meant to be human, but they slipped through his fingers like smoke. Then came the intelligence reports. A group of Barzan scientists, refusing to accept defeat, had gone into hiding. They were working on something big, a doomsday weapon capable of wiping out humanity once and for all. Despite his fragile mental state, Henry knew what he had to do. He assembled a strike team of the few remaining apprentices and prepared to infiltrate the Barzan facility. The mission took them through an extra-dimensional labyrinth. Reality twisted and warped around them as they navigated the non-Euclidean geometry. Henry's team pushed on, their eldritch abilities allowing them to bend space and time to reach their goal. They emerged in a cavernous laboratory filled with arcane machinery. But they weren't alone. The Barzan scientists had created their own super soldiers, twisted abominations that were more monster than man. The battle was fierce. Henry's team fought valiantly, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. As he watched his comrades fall one by one, something inside Henry snapped. He let go, surrendering himself fully to the cosmic forces that had reshaped him. Power beyond imagining coursed through his body. With a scream that shook the very foundations of reality, Henry unleashed his full might. The fabric of space-time tore asunder. The Barzan soldiers were obliterated, their bodies twisted and broken by forces they couldn't comprehend. But in his rage, Henry had gone too far. A rift opened, larger than any he'd created before. Through it came something ancient and terrible, a being of such cosmic horror that merely gazing upon it threatened to shatter Henry's remaining sanity. As the eldritch abomination poured into our reality, Henry realized the true scope of his mistake. He'd stopped the Barzan threat, but in doing so, he'd unleashed something far worse. Now, with what little humanity he had left slipping away, Henry faced an impossible choice. To rescue the star systems, he might have to sacrifice the last shreds of his human identity and fully embrace the cosmic horror he'd become. Henry plummeted through a vortex of writhing darkness, the last echoes of his scream swallowed by the void. He slammed into a surface that felt both solid and liquid, his body sinking partway into the strange matter before coming to rest. Gasping, he pushed himself up, blinking rapidly as his eyes struggled to adjust. The hellscape around him defied comprehension. Impossible geometries twisted in on themselves. Structures of flesh and metal melded together in nauseating configurations. The air itself seemed alive, thick with whispers and half-glimpsed shapes that vanished when he tried to focus on them. "What is this place?" Henry muttered, his voice sounding flat and lifeless in the oppressive atmosphere. He stumbled forward, each step sending ripples through the ground beneath his feet. In the distance, he saw a familiar silhouette, one of his fellow apprentices. Hope surged within him as he called out, "Hey, over here!" The figure turned, and Henry's blood ran cold. It was Jenkins, all right, but not as he remembered him. Jenkins' face was a mass of writhing tentacles, his body grotesquely elongated and covered in pulsating growths. "Welcome, brother," Jenkins gurgled, his voice a cacophony of alien tones. "The Void Mother awaits." Henry backed away, raising his hands defensively. "Jenkins, what happened to you?" The thing that had been Jenkins lunged forward with inhuman speed. Henry's training kicked in, and he instinctively tapped into the cosmic forces that had reshaped him. Reality bent around him as he phased through Jenkins' attack, reforming several meters away. "I'm sorry, old friend," Henry said, his voice heavy with regret. He focused his will, and a beam of pure energy lanced from his palm, disintegrating the corrupted apprentice. As the ashes settled, Henry heard a familiar laugh. He spun to see General Naso standing atop a nearby ridge of bone-like material. "You killed me once, human," Naso sneered, his body now a patchwork of cybernetics and pulsating flesh. "Let's see if you can do it again." The battle that followed was unlike anything Henry had experienced. Naso's attacks warped the fabric of reality itself, while Henry countered with his own manipulations of fundamental forces. They traded blows across multiple dimensions, tearing holes in space-time with each clash. As they fought, Henry's mind raced. How was this possible? How had Naso been resurrected and corrupted? The answers came in flashes of insight, each revelation more horrifying than the last. He saw Mortis, not as the stern leader he knew, but as a puppet dancing on cosmic strings. He glimpsed the true architects of the Death's Apprentices program, entities beyond human comprehension, playing a game of creation and destruction that spanned eons. And at the center of it all, he felt her, the Void Mother, ancient beyond measure, hungry beyond imagining. Henry realized with growing horror that his powers, his very essence, were not his own. They were a fragment of the Void Mother herself, implanted within him as part of some grand, inscrutable plan. With a final, desperate effort, Henry tore open a gateway in reality. He dove through, leaving the screaming form of Nesso behind. He tumbled through dimensions, fleeing the grasping tendrils of the Void Mother's influence. When he finally emerged, he found himself standing amidst the rubble of what had once been a thriving human colony. The air was thick with ash and the stench of death. In the distance, he heard the sounds of battle, energy weapons, and inhuman shrieks. "Henry!" a voice called out. He turned to see Sarah, one of the few surviving apprentices ducking behind a shattered wall. "Where the hell have you been? We're getting slaughtered out here!" Henry moved to join her, his palms sweating from all he had learned. "Sarah, we need to talk. Everything we thought we knew, it's all wrong. The Void Mother—" Sarah cut him off with a sharp gesture. "Save it. Whatever cosmic bullshit you've been dealing with, it'll have to wait. Right now, we need to seal that rift before those things overrun the entire galaxy." Henry nodded, pushing aside his turmoil. "You're right. What's the plan?" Sarah's eyes glinted with persistence. "There's an ancient alien superweapon. If we can find it and figure out how to use it, we might have a chance of closing the dimensional tear." "Then let's move," Henry said, readying himself for the fight ahead. As they prepared to leave their cover, a piercing shriek split the air. A horde of void-spawn creatures poured over a nearby hill, their forms a nightmarish blend of flesh and shadow. Henry and Sarah exchanged a grim look. The race against time had begun, with the fate of all existence hanging in the balance. Henry stumbled as reality snapped back into focus. The acrid stench of burning metal and flesh assaulted his nostrils. He blinked, taking in the devastation surrounding him on Avalis Prime. Sarah grabbed his arm, steadying him. "Henry, look." He followed her gaze to the horizon. Massive obsidian structures erupted from the ground, piercing the sky. The air crackled with otherworldly energy, making Henry's skin crawl. "She's coming," he whispered, feeling the Void Mother's presence growing stronger by the second. Jenkins, his face ashen, rushed over with a battered datapad. "I've got something. These records mention a progenitor superweapon. It might be our only shot at stopping this." Henry scanned the fragmented data, his mind racing. A cosmic doomsday device, but it's on a dead world, and we don't have the codes. Sarah cursed. "And we've got a fleet of those void-twisted Barzan ships between us and our only hope." Henry's eyes flickered to the dying sun of Avalis. An idea formed, desperate and reckless. "We overload the sun, trigger a supernova to clear our path." Jenkins paled. "That's insane. We'd be cutting it way too close." "You got a better idea?" Sarah shot back. Henry raised his hand, silencing them. "No time to argue. Let's move." They raced to their battered ship, dodging debris and the occasional void spawn. Henry's fingers flew over the controls, plotting a series of daring jumps to the system's solar regulators. "Hold on!" he shouted as they plunged into the void. The next hours blurred into a frantic montage of precision jumps and surgical strikes. They materialized near massive solar containment facilities, Henry and Sarah laying down cover fire, while Jenkins sabotaged the systems. Void spawn screeched and clawed at their ship, leaving deep gouges in the hull. Henry felt his powers straining as he manipulated gravity to crush the monsters. "Last one!" Jenkins yelled, his hands shaking as he input the final sequence. The sun pulsed ominously. Henry didn't wait to see the results. He punched in the coordinates for the dead world and activated the drive. A blinding flash erupted behind them as they jumped. The ship bucked violently, alarms blaring. Henry fought the controls, riding the cosmic shockwave that propelled them across the galaxy. They crashed onto the dead world's surface, the ship's hull groaning in protest. Henry stumbled out, his legs wobbling. "We made it," Sarah breathed, her voice filled with disbelief. Before them loomed an ancient structure, its architecture defying human comprehension. As they approached, the air shimmered with hidden defenses. Henry raised his hand, focusing his will. Reality bent around them as they navigated the gauntlet of traps. Jenkins screamed as a temporal distortion aged him decades in seconds before Henry could reverse it. Finally, they reached the inner sanctum. A pedestal held a shimmering object, the cosmic key. Henry reached for it, his fingers trembling. As he grasped the key, knowledge flooded his mind. His eyes widened in horror as he understood the price that must be paid. "Henry?" Sarah asked, noticing his expression. "What is it?" He turned to his comrades, his voice heavy. "To activate the weapon, I have to give up my powers, my immortality, everything." Jenkins stepped forward. "There has to be another way." A deafening roar cut him off. The rift was fully forming. They were out of time. Henry squared his shoulders. "No choice. Get clear. I'll end this." Before they could argue, he activated the key. Pain unlike anything he'd ever experienced tore through him. He felt the Void Mother's essence being ripped from his cells. Energy exploded outward, engulfing the rift. Henry poured everything he had into the maelstrom, feeling his life force ebbing away. As darkness closed in, he saw fleeting images, a future free from cosmic horror, his friends safeguarding a new era of peace. Henry Wilson smiled, feeling truly human for the first time in years. Then, he knew no more.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.